Good afternoon, and welcome to the Wednesday afternoon conference call with Trusts Unlimited. This is Jim George speaking. I'm the non-attorney spokesman and facilitator for Trusts Unlimited, and I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to this call, particularly those of you calling in for the first time and those that will be listening to the replay over the next 24 to 48 hours. We like to move quickly through these calls, bottom line the information for you. I'm sorry I got started a little late here. I've been on the phone nonstop this morning, and I didn't realize my phone was about to die, so I had to run around and try to find the extension cord so that I could get this thing to my desk. There's a lot going on. It's somewhat irritating for me. Whenever I have an opportunity to get on some of these international calls, they always schedule them for noon on Wednesday, which is, of course, when our scheduled call is. And then whenever we seem to have really significant hearings in Washington, once again, they seem to be on Wednesday morning. So I was kind of enthralled with watching the Senate hearings on election fraud and then some of the other calls that I was making this morning, and my phone nearly died. So, again, I apologize for that. I do have good information for today, though, and our standard format for a few minutes talking about the reinstitution and revaluation of the Iraqi dinar, which we consider to be the base currency for the potential reset of some of these other currencies. A few minutes talking about the program that we've put in place to assist you, and then we go to a brief Q&A. Again, before I get started, I wanted to mention a couple of things. First, and this has to do with the hearings on election fraud. And the reason this is an issue is I've gotten a lot of contacts lately from people that are concerned that if Trump's not reelected, that the reinstitution and revaluation of the dinar is not going to happen, certainly not anytime soon. I have a couple of responses to that. First, even if Donald Trump were not to be reelected, and in my opinion, he will be, but even if that's not the case, he will be the president until January 20th. If you're paying attention, he's put a lot of things in place which are going to make it extremely difficult for a Biden administration to reverse. Certainly, if by reversing certain policies, the result to the American people is negative, they're not going to be able to blame Trump. They're going to try, but they're not going to be able to blame Trump if they change the channel and it's a program you don't want to watch. That's going to be on them. The other issue is the information I got from the IMF call last week, I guess perhaps it was the week before that. I can't even remember now. There's so much going on. But I will be touching base with you on that information. So let's go ahead and get started and talk a little bit about the situation in Iraq. First, by way of disclaimer, Trusts Unlimited is not the purveyor of the dinar and these other currencies. We're not advocating either the sale or purchase of these currencies, but as rather substantial currency holders ourselves, we're sharing with you the information that we think is relevant. And, of course, the most relevant piece of information for those of us holding the dinar and these other currencies is the window for the reinstitution of the dinar. We continue to believe that January of 2021 seems the most plausible date, and the information that I'm going to share with you now, in my opinion, only points to January 2021 as the window for the reinstitution of the dinar. Now, the CBI is saying that the project to complete the zeros should be completed by December 31st. They're also saying that once they have completed the project to delete the zeros, they will need approximately 15 days to ascertain the inflationary impact before they go ahead and reinstitute. So if you do the math there, you're looking at a reinstitution in about mid-January. Now, another concern some of our people have had is the fact that the dinar has been somewhat devalued and that there's a lot of volatility with the dinar in country. This has to do with speculators. Whenever you see a major move in a currency, there's always fluctuations like this because of speculators selling long, selling short. doing all kinds of things, and they have currency arbitrages. I don't want to get into the weeds with this, but there's a lot of explanations for that volatility. But once they finally release those lower denoms, all that speculation is going to stop. Now, there are some productive meetings going on now between the government of Iraq and the regional government of Kurdistan to resolve some issues that they've been at loggerheads at for about a decade. So this is good news. And the Sadrist movement, which is really the spearhead of all of the reform movements in Iraq, is very pleased and have stated so publicly. The government of Iraq has also announced that approval for their budget will be postponed until early February. Now, this has also upset a lot of people because they believe that the reinstitution of the dinar must occur simultaneously with the budget. Now, that could have been a possibility. The dinar could reinstitute just before the budget or reinstitute just after the budget. But in my opinion, actually, I think this is really good news, and I'll tell you why. Because there are two issues that are going to be positively affected by holding off until February. First, we continue to see the price of oil, the price of a global barrel, creeping up. That's good for Iraq because it increases their projected revenues, which reduces their projected budget deficits. And second, by having the budget postponed until early February, that gives them an opportunity, a very good window for the reinstitution of the dinar. The reinstitution of the dinar means economic growth for a number of reasons. Their ability to pay international contractors with their own currency and growth of the economy. So postponing the budget till February, as far as I'm concerned, if anything, is a good thing. Now, with regard to the IMF call, there was some information there that is of interest to us. Now, much of the call dealt with programs and plans to deal with COVID relief for countries that have really been hit hard. They've been talking about extending loans to certain countries or initiating new loans to countries, one of which happens to be Iraq. But the key here is the agreement to extend further loans to Iraq is tethered to the reinstitution of their currency. So once again, we have another scenario where the reinstitution of their currency looks like the only plausible solution. Now, the IMF conducted what's referred to as an Article 4 consultation with Iraq. What's that mean? It means a team of IMF economists met with Iraqi government officials, parliamentarians, and other business leaders to discuss their economic progress and their plans for the future. But the central underlying issue that concerns the team of IMF economists is the negotiation of an acceptable exchange rate, the reinstitution rate. So they basically wanted to kick the tires to see where Iraq was so that they had the information they need to properly negotiate the reinstituted rate. So this is the formula as I see it right now. My expectation is for the revaluation of the dinar globally in approximately 60 days. In December, we see the education program and the deletion of the zeros. In early February, we see the passage of the 2021 budget. In mid-January, we're looking at the reinstitution of the dinar in anticipation of the passage of their budget in early February. And in mid-February, we're looking for the IMF to take the Iraqi dinar out of the program rate and place it on the Forex. Now, when the currency reinstitutes in country, it will still be pegged to the U.S. dollar. But once it revalues, it'll be and enters the Forex, they'll remove the U.S. peg, and the dinar will then be pegged to the IMF basket of currencies. And again, my expectation for all of this is the next 60 days. So those of us that have been on this train ride for the last 10 years know that Iraq has this incredible ability to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. But it looks like they've checked all of the boxes. They've dotted all their I's, they've crossed all their T's, and they have established what we, in my opinion, can look at as a very sound glide path, again, for the reinstitution of the dinar in January and the revaluation of the dinar sometime, in my expectation, in mid-February. Now, this is all good news. We've all been waiting for a very long time for this to occur. One other thing I want to mention before we get into our program, and that is the concern people have had about this election. And as I said, in my opinion, based on everything that I've seen, everything I've heard, everything I've read, all of the people that I've spoken to, some of whom know what they're talking about, I think that's better than 50-50 that Donald Trump will be reelected. But in the event that he is not reelected, again, I think there are a lot more players involved than just the United States Treasury with regard to the reinstitution of the dinar in the global economy. I also think that Donald Trump we've gotten to know this animal over the last 4 years. I think he's going to try to get a lot done before January 20th, and I don't think it's unreasonable to include assisting Iraq with the reinstitution of their currency. So that being said, again, I think we're looking at 60 days for the reinstitution globally, which is, of course, the event that we are concerned about. Now, there is a tax issue that I'll address with regard to the reinstitution in country, but the revaluation, again, we're looking at 60 days. Now, that being the case, and I've said this many times, most Dinarians and most of our clients are average, hardworking American citizens who, for the very first time in their life, will be faced with managing a very substantial amount of wealth. And because that's the case, we decided to put a turnkey program in place to assist you. It's a two-phased program. Phase 1 is pre-RV. Phase 2 is post-RV. Pre-RV involves the establishment of a package of pre-RV asset protection trusts with the assignment of your dinar and other currencies to that trust package. Post-RV involves all of the products, services, and professional referrals that will be made available to you, and that will be very important in your decision-making process after the revaluation of the dinar. So let's start with Phase 1, which is, again, the establishment of your package of pre-RV asset protection trusts with the assignment of your currencies on paper to that trust package. Now, there are some very good reasons why we have established a package of irrevocable trusts. Very simply because it's the best asset protection available domestically. Now, there are other assets and entities, rather, that individuals can establish to provide some level of asset protection. For example, some individuals have established LLCs and sub-S corporations. They do provide some level of asset protection, but primarily by dividing business assets from personal assets. Now, the problem here is that the currencies are a personal asset. In addition, courts have ruled that LLCs and sub-S corporations owned in the majority by either one person or a closely held group can be pierced for civil litigation. So the LLC and sub-S corporation is going to be inappropriate for your needs. Some individuals have established revocable trusts. Now, revocable or living or loving trusts, as they're referred to, can exempt your estate from the cost and delay of probate, and in some cases can substantially reduce and even eliminate the federal estate tax. But the revocable or living or loving trust can provide no privacy or asset protection. So they're going to be inappropriate for your needs. Some individuals have established individual or single irrevocable trusts, and they certainly provide more asset protection than the previous entities I've mentioned. However, even the single irrevocable trust has an inherent flaw, and it's this. If any asset possessed by this trust is dragged into civil litigation, that could necessarily drag all of your other assets and net worth into that litigation as well, because they're all owned by that single individual irrevocable trust. The solution, therefore, is to establish a package of irrevocable trusts This is the only way that you can have the privacy and asset protection you're going to need both pre- and post-RV. And in addition, such a trust package must be established prior to the reinstitution and revaluation of the dinar, and I'm going to explain this to you right now. First, by establishing this trust package, you will preserve your privacy and your anonymity. That's because assets held within our trust package are sealed, meaning that the general public will have no knowledge of your net worth or your actual holdings. Second, by establishing this trust package, you're going to be able to avoid personal IRS scrutiny. If you are holding these currencies in direct title when they revalue, the IRS computers will probably spit out an audit. And with the potential magnitude of this revaluation relative to your prior year's earnings, you're probably looking at a full-blown 6-year audit. Such an audit would be time-consuming. It would certainly be frustrating because it's come along at precisely the time these currencies have revalued, and there's much more important things that you'd rather be spending your time on. And third, the cost of a 6-year IRS audit would probably be more than the cost of our asset protection trust. On the other hand, if your pre-RV asset protection trust is in force and you have assigned your currencies on paper to that trust package, you will have successfully transferred the taxable event of this revaluation from yourself personally to our trust, your trust. Now, this is important for 2 reasons. There's less than a 10% chance of an IRS audit if this taxable event were to occur within a rather sophisticated trust package such as ours. But second, and most importantly, even if the IRS determines to audit your trust, they can't do a 6-year audit. Why? Because the only taxable event within the trust will be the revaluation itself. The third reason you'd want to establish this trust package is if you plan on gifting currency to family and friends, and many of our clients have expressed this as one of their priorities. Philanthropic gifting can always be done on a tax-preferred basis, either pre- or post-RV. But in order to avoid a substantial 40% gift tax, you're going to need to gift currencies to family and friends prior to the revaluation. Now, if you're gifting to individuals that you'd have no problem giving them the currency to exchange for themselves, or giving them the U.S. dollar lump sum after you have negotiated the exchange, that can be accomplished outside of a trust with a standard gift letter. But if you are hesitant for any reason to give these individuals the post-RV lump sum, you can gift to them through our specially designed gift subtrust. And because you're gifting through this subtrust, their U.S. dollars will be protected along with yours. In addition, the language of this subtrust will allow you to gift up to a certain amount of a currency or currencies, meaning you can gift to these individuals the exact U.S. dollar amount that you had in mind, irrespective of the exchange rate. And again, because you're gifting through this subtrust, you will be able to directly manage, invest, and distribute these funds to these individuals as you deem appropriate. The fourth reason you'd want to establish this trust package is because it's been structured in such a way as to allow your estate to bypass the cost and delay of probate and the federal estate tax. I'm going to give you 2 quick scenarios. Scenario number 1, you purchase 5 million dinar for $5,000. The day after that, those currencies revalue for $25 million. The day after that, you pass away, leaving your heirs an estate of $25 million. Now that estate must go through probate, a process that ordinarily can take anywhere from 6 to 18 months. But probate is a public disclosure process, meaning that the general public will be aware of the size of your estate, who your heirs are, and how much they each stand to inherit. So if anyone feels they have a legitimate claim against you, your estate, or your heirs, they can simply file that claim with a probate court. and that could tie your estate up for years and in some cases even decades. And your heirs will have either limited access or no access at all to their respective inheritance until the probate process is completed. Then there's something called the federal estate tax. This is the tax that the federal government would assess in order for that estate to be transferred to your heirs. Under current law, approximately $10 million of that $25 million estate would bypass any federal estate tax, but the balance could be taxed as much as 65%. Now, this scenario is not only unacceptable, it's completely and totally avoidable. How? Scenario number 2. You purchase 5 million dinar for $5,000. The day after that, you assign those currencies on paper to our asset protection trust package. The day after that, those currencies revalue for $25 million. The day after that, you pass away, leaving your heirs that very same estate of $25 million, but this time protected in our asset protection trust package. As a result, there will be no probate. There will be no public disclosure of your estate. Your heirs will have immediate access to their respective inheritance, and the federal estate tax will be zero, saving your heirs as much as 55% of their inheritance. The fifth reason you'd want to establish this pre-RV trust package is for some very specific asset protection benefits. One pre-RV, one post-RV. Pre-RV, this trust package will allow you to circumvent something called the Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act. Now, what does that mean? Under our system of civil procedure, you can only be sued for what you actually own in direct title or the value of property at the time you transfer it out of title to an entity like our trust package. So let's take the previous example from before. You purchase 5 million dinar for $5,000. You transfer the currencies to our trust. They subsequently revalue for $25 million. You begin to live a lifestyle more reflective of your newfound wealth, and a couple of years down the road, someone sees that you're living rather comfortably and decides for whatever reason that they're going to sue you. Well, this prospective plaintiff has a couple of problems. First, he or she better have a very strong case and very deep pockets, because this trust has been specifically designed to make it extremely expensive and extremely time-consuming to pursue civil litigation. But second, and most importantly, once any prospective plaintiff learns that pursuant to the Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act, the only thing they could ever win by way of a civil award would be $5,000, the value of the currencies when you transferred them out of title to our trust package, and none of the post-RV value of $25 million, there will be no lawsuit. Post-RV, there's a benefit I like to refer to as limited liability stop-loss. This protects you from future bad acts after you have acquired this wealth. This protection is accomplished through a legal strategy referred to as segregation of assets. This is why we've established a package of trusts, and I'll give you an example of how this would work. Once again, we'll use the same example. You purchase 5 million dinar for $5,000, transfer the currencies to our trust. They subsequently revalue for $25 million. Now that you have $25 million in trust, you decide to make some purchases. So you purchase a larger primary residence, a vacation home, perhaps a half a dozen rental properties for tax write-off and additional cash flow, a couple of cars, a boat, and let's say an RV. But as you purchase these items, you place each of them in their own separate subtrust to be managed by your master trust. This is why we've established a package of trusts. And how does this protect you from future bad acts after you've acquired this wealth? Well, I'll give you an example. Let's say one day you're driving one of your new cars. You have an accident. The accident is clearly your fault, and tragically someone is seriously injured or even killed. Well, the family of the victim is going to want to sue you. But remember, civil suits are about monetary awards, and you don't legally own anything. So the plaintiffs would be left to sue the owner of the car that you were driving. Well, who owns that car? One of your subtrusts, of which you are merely the beneficiary. And what's in that subtrust? Merely that one car and the car insurance policy. In that scenario, the car insurance carrier will negotiate an out-of-court settlement with the victim's family. You will mercifully not be involved in those rather unpleasant negotiations. The car insurance carrier will repair or replace your car, making you whole. And this is important. All of your other assets are safely protected in the other subtrusts. Why? Because under the law, those separate subtrusts are separate legal entities or persons, and the plaintiffs would have no standing to pursue a separate legal entity or person having nothing whatsoever to do with the accident. So your package of trusts work very much the way a commercial barge would work, where all of the valuable cargo is stored in a series of small compartments. Why? In the event that any compartment is ever breached, the only potential loss would be the cargo in that one compartment. The cargo in the other compartments is safe and secure due to the firewalls, and the barge will never sink. Now, these benefits are lost to you if you do not establish your package of trust prior to the revaluation, and I would argue prior to the reinstitution of the dinar. Now, there is, of course, one other benefit, and it's this. If you are, in fact, the holder of one of our pre-RV asset protection trust packages, then you will be eligible to participate in Phase 2, all of the products, services, and professional referrals that will be made available to you after the revaluation of the dinar and these other currencies. Now, I'll just make mention of one benefit here today. Trusts Unlimited will be sponsoring a post-RV seminar to be held in Disney World, Florida, approximately 30 days after the revaluation of the Iraqi dinar. Present at that seminar will, of course, be the staff of Trusts Unlimited to assist you with the management and funding of your trust packages post-RV. Many of our clients have already expressed a desire to establish scholarship funds, foundational trusts, special needs trusts, charitable remainder trusts, and even the more complicated 501c3 nonprofit and offshore trusts. And the proper way to fund those entities is with a direct transfer of funds from your asset protection trust to those newly formed entities. We'll also have our tax specialists at this seminar. With this new acquired wealth, you're going to need to understand some of the more sophisticated tax strategies to legally reduce your tax exposure. We'll also have our independent fee-based wealth managers there as well. You're going to need to reposition assets after the revaluation for a number of reasons. First, we know statistically that 95% of all windfalls, however large and from whatever source, are lost within 3 to 5 years due to inexperience, mismanagement, and fraud. We also know that under the new G20 bank bail-in provisions, the failure of banks in the future will no longer be made whole through the general taxing authority of the respective governments, but first by the confiscation of funds at the accounts at those banks, which is another reason to get money out of the banks and work in other markets. And lastly, the general global shift from fiat-based to Basel III compliant commodity-backed currencies in and of itself is going to create extremely volatile financial markets, and you're going to want a substantial amount of your net worth in tangible assets to avoid that volatility. Now, our trust package is initially a package of 10 trusts, consisting of one master trust that will hold your assigned currencies pre-RV, financial assets like bank accounts and investment accounts post-RV, and is authorized under the trust agreement to manage the subtrusts, one optional gift subtrust, which can at any time be converted to a standard subtrust, and 8 additional standard subtrusts to hold physical assets like real estate, cars, boats, etc. Now, this was the simplification of a rather sophisticated trust package that we've utilized in the past for our more affluent clients, a package that had an initial cost of anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000. But about a decade ago, when we decided to work with Dinarians, we knew that the cost of that trust was going to be unaffordable for too many. So by basically deferring the funding of the trust and simplifying the package, we've been able to reduce the cost to $3,000. Now, there are a number of ways you can pay for that. Pay us up front. We'll discount the price further to $2,500, saving you an additional $500. If that's not possible, we do have a deferred payment arrangement. You'd make an initial payment of $525, which sum would basically offset our out-of-pocket costs just to produce and deliver your trust package to you. The balance of the $3,000 would then be paid in $100 monthly installments. We will charge no interest. The only proviso is once the revaluation of the Iraqi dinar occurs, any unpaid balance would need to be paid within 30 days. So with this approach, anyone that has currencies and understands the need for getting their affairs in order and their trust in place pre-RV should be in a position to afford to do so. One other suggestion, we do accept credit cards. Pay us up front with a credit card. Not only will you get the $500 discount, but the minimum payment on your card would be substantially less than the $100 a month you'd pay under our deferred payment arrangement. But we will work with you with whatever method works best for you. Our objective, again, is to help you get your affairs in order and your trust in place for all of the reasons that we stated here. Now, we will be going to a Q&A in just a moment. But before we do, and again for our newer callers, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Trusts Unlimited and why you should seriously consider contacting us to get our initial no-obligation informational package. Our trust package was authored by our attorney, Robert Bly. He's been a practicing attorney for over 40 years, specializing in the areas of estate planning, asset protection, and offshore planning. I myself hold degrees in political science, macroeconomics, and finance. I've worked on these areas for over 38 years, and I, along with my clients, were personally involved in the reinstatement of the Kuwaiti dinar in the early 90s. So between the two of us, Robert Bly and I have over 78 years' experience working precisely in this niche area, and I frankly know of no firm that can make that claim. Now, Bob and I have actually been working together for a decade in the areas of estate planning, asset protection, and offshore planning, and it has been disheartening from time to time to see people walk away from sound estate planning and trust creation because of the mistaken belief that by doing so, they have somehow lost control of their assets and their affairs. In point of fact, it's just the reverse. Under our system of civil litigation, it's when you hold assets in direct title that you can either lose control of them or lose them outright. And it's invariably at those times in life that you need and want control. If you've lived for any length of time, you've either experienced in your own life or through friends and family things like unexpected divorce, permanent incapacitation, the onset of dementia, premature death and prolonged and complicated probate processes. Then there are investment losses, business losses, and even bankruptcies. The number 2 loss of wealth now in the aggregate, courtesy of the information age, is identity theft. But the number 1 loss of personal wealth remains confiscation through civil litigation. Anything you own in direct title can be taken from you. So the only way that you can manage, protect, and control everything in our system of civil litigation is through the establishment of a package of irrevocable trusts, and particularly if you have an asset like these currencies that you're anticipating a substantial increase in value. And we at Trusts Unlimited will do everything we can to help you accomplish your personal and financial objectives, both pre- and post-RV, as we understand them. So again, thanks for listening to the call. I'm going to go to the Q&A in just a moment. I suggest you have a pen and paper handy if the things we've discussed are of interest. We will give you our contact information. And again, I suggest you get our initial no-obligation informational package. It does contain everything you need should you decide to establish a trust, but that's entirely up to you. It includes a lot of information about us, about trusts, about the revaluation. You can review this package, contact us by phone or email if you have any questions. We'll be happy to assist you, and there will be no consultation fee. So I'm going to open the Q&A now. 2 quick rules on the Q&A. We don't take service calls on the Q&A session. This is for individuals that are interested in our services. Our existing clients can contact us by phone or email if they have questions. And second, for obvious reasons, your name and number must be on the screen in order to participate in the Q&A. So I'm going to open now. And while I'm waiting for any potential questions, I'd like to give you our contact information. You can go to our website, which is trusts with an S, unlimitedllc.com. Our email address is trusts with an S, unlimitedllc@gmail.com. Our phone service is 307-274-4122. If you'd like to listen to a recent conference call playback, or if you'd be kind enough to refer us to someone that might be interested in our services, you can either go to YouTube and then go to Trusts Unlimited, or you can go to IQD calls and go to Trusts Unlimited, or you can simply dial the same number that you dialed for this live call this afternoon with the exception of the last number. Rather than dialing a 4, you'll dial a 3 and then use the same access code, which is 739-394#. If you'd like to be included on our email list, you can go to our website, go to the bottom, enter your name and email address where indicated. You should be in our email list within 24 hours. Bear in mind that we only send emails out very periodically pre-RV, but after the reinstitution of the Dinar, emails may go out as often as weekly. So let's go to our calls here. Our first call is area code 347. That's 347. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Praveen from New York. Were you surprised that the U.S. Supreme Court didn't want to intervene in the election fraud case?
I was a little surprised initially, but after I gave it some thought, I'm not that surprised. There are other avenues for determining the winner of the election without the Supreme Court getting involved. I think that the court, I don't want to use the word cowardice because I think that's too harsh. I think, in my opinion, they are so concerned about one branch intervening in a co-equal branch, I think they would prefer that this be resolved through the legislatures of the states and possibly even the United States Congress. And if you understand constitutionally the process, this can be resolved without the Supreme Court rendering a decision, although it's not beyond the realm of possibility that the Supreme Court could get brought into this again. Remember, a lot of the rulings thus far have had to do not with the substance of the evidence, but on procedural issues. So it's possible that the Supreme Court could be brought back into this. But the next 30 days are going to be extremely stressful for a number of reasons. But again, I'm not, at this point, after giving it a lot of thought, I'm not really surprised at the Supreme Court's decision.
Okay, but the Electoral College already voted for Biden. So I mean, unless I think the only thing that it has to have by Congress in January 6th, when Congress meets to count the electoral votes, and objections have to be raised. That's the only. That's
Correct.
Really the only.
That's what I'm saying. There's a process. Remember, in Gore versus
Bush,
the Florida Supreme Court ruled in Gore's favor. Bush bumped it up to the Supreme Court, who eventually ruled in his favor. But during that entire time, Gore and the media and everyone else called Gore the president-elect. So that doesn't necessarily mean anything. And you're exactly correct. The key here is that Trump cannot basically say that it's over. He cannot concede. And it's funny because the very people that are screaming and yelling that Trump needs to concede are the people that were saying prior to the election to Biden, under no circumstances must you concede, because they knew this would probably end up in the House and the Senate, and all you need is one House member and one House senator to say that they want the Congress to get involved because one of the two parties didn't concede. So we'll have to see how this plays out.
Okay, but because also you mentioned Bush versus Gore, like I think in 2000, I think they did a study afterward, and it was shown had Gore had they recounted the entire state, he would have won.
You're incorrect there. If they did the recount, 4 recounts were done, and all 4 of them showed that Bush won.
No, they only did that I was reading somewhere like, because Gore only requested recounts in certain Democratic counties, not the entire state, but I was reading somewhere where they did the recount of the entire state. I think it would show that.
No. Gore said count every vote. He wanted the entire state recounted. However, in his complaint, he did not want the absentee military vote recounted, which was 75% for Bush. All right? Bush went to the Supreme Court. He got them to rule that the proper thing to do is to recount the suspect districts according to Florida law. They went back in after that and said, well, we know that's what they did, and we know that Bush was declared the winner, but we're still going to get back and count all the votes. And when they counted all the votes, including the absentee military votes, Bush won.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Our next caller is area code 801. That's 801. Go ahead.
Jim, it's Clay Blackwell. How are you this morning?
Yes, sir. How you doing, Clay?
I'm doing just fine. Listen, you said a couple of things last week that I've been pondering all week, one of which was the deletion of the zeros and the reinstitution in country. If they remove those zeros from the currency in country, seeing that the CBI is in control of the Iraqi currency, doesn't that affect all currency globally for the Iraqi dinar?
No. It affects the currencies being transacted by Iraqi nationals. The IMF and the Forex will determine the value of the provisional currency, and it's quite clear. Remember, you and I are thinking just in terms of our little paltry investments. And when I say paltry, relative to the hedge funds, the global currency arbitrage individuals, and all the central banks that have invested in Iraq. What Executive Order 13303 said is that we as individual private citizens are going to be treated the same way as they are. They coughed up trillions in Iraq, and they expect to be reimbursed handsomely for what they've done. And Executive Order 13303, unlike previous situations, said we're going to participate in that.
Okay, so in a roundabout way, what you're basically saying is they can do whatever they want in country regarding their dinar, because they obviously don't want to make all the Iraqis rich by moving those zeros on the rate by reducing.
In other words, the Iraqi citizen received a gift from the international community, the money they needed to survive. Okay, they're going to get their currency intact. We, the international investors, whether we're individuals or central banks or hedge fund managers, are going to receive a profit for investing in Iraq. Those citizens didn't invest in Iraq. They suffered the consequences of the Saddam regime and having to remove him, but they didn't actually invest their hard dollars in the country. We did, and we're going to be reimbursed handsomely for it.
Okay. It sounds to me, Jim, like the IMF has a lot of control with this thing. You indicated last week that the IMF has already told Iraq that they need to revalue their currency in order to receive a loan from the IMF. So what I'm actually asking is, what is going to trigger this thing? I mean, it seems like everything's lined up. I know the election is part of it, but I don't think whether Bush or not Bush, but Trump or Biden get in is going to be the determining factor as to whether they revalue their currency. What is the one thing that's going to trigger this thing?
The reinstitution in country.
Okay, but that there has to be a force behind that, though.
Yeah, the force behind that is they want to complete their budget. They want to secure loans to help with the deficit that they're going to continue to have probably through 2021. So they need the reinstitution of their currency. They also need the reinstitution of their currency so they can consummate all of their international contracts. People don't want to have to convert to the U.S. dollar to do business in Iraq because there's fees involved in that. They'd rather do business with another country that has a functional currency. The reinstitution of the dinar is necessary. The country has to demonstrate as a functional domestic currency so that the IMF can then subsequently take it out of the program rate and float it on the Forex.
I know that's
one of the reasons. That's also one of the reasons why the IMF went to Iraq to talk with the government officials and with the business leaders so they can get a handle on what's going on in their negotiation for what that reinstituted rate is going to be.
Okay, that makes sense. All right. Well, do you think that the price of oil going up will be a deterrent on what the RV could be? In other words, if they're making money in oil, why would they RV their currency?
Because that in and of itself is not going to – all that's going to do is help to reduce their budget deficit. They have to have a functional currency. They cannot negotiate international contracts. They cannot do international trade. They can't do these things without a functional currency. Right now they're operating using the U.S. dollar, and their reserves are dwindling. There's not an unlimited supply of that. They can't keep selling their currency, auctioning their currency to get U.S. dollars to function. They're going to have their own currency.
So basically they have to come off that program rate and be international on the Forex before they can make a move to do anything. They can set everything up, but they really can't get anything done.
Let me put it to you this way. They're functioning on the U.S. dollar. They're in the middle of the desert. They got one canteen left. When that water's gone, they're done. Okay, so they got to find a water hole before that canteen is empty. The water hole is the reinstitution of their currency.
Okay. Let me ask you this last question. The pegging to the dinar to the dollar, you mentioned last week that you were, and I'm going to use one of your words, you were gleaning information from these conference calls that you've been in. Is that where you got that information, that it'll be pegged to, that it is pegged to the U.S. dollar, and then they will unpeg it once it goes on the Forex or once it goes into the IMF basket of currencies? I was a little confused with that.
Well, yes and no. Of course, I get that information on the calls, but if you understand how it works, in order to get on the Forex and come off the program rate, you will be pegged. Now, there are currencies that are loosely pegged to the dollar, but they're not currencies that are in trouble. They're not countries that are in trouble that are under the auspices of the IMF. They're not in the program rate. So basically, they're putting the Iraqi dinar on training wheels, all right, and they're going to peg it to the basket of currencies. Now, that could change in the future, but that's the way this is going to happen. It'll reinstitute in country. They'll negotiate that rate with the IMF. Once they see and demonstrate that their currency is functional domestically, then at that point the IMF will take them out of the program rate and float it on the Forex at whatever the negotiated reinstitution rate is, and then the currency will rise or fall based on a number of factors, one of which is the price of oil.
Okay, that makes sense. All right. That makes perfect sense. Thank you, Jim. I really appreciate that, my friend.
Sure, Clay. You ask good questions, my friend. You make me think.
Oh, thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Our next caller, actually our last caller here is area code 312. That's 312. It's got to be Les.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. How are you?
Okay, what's up?
Well, the last caller mentioned this thing about them and the fuel or the oil going up, and then they readjust their budget. And if we continue to have the oil prices rising, they continue to adjust their budget, which they did in the past. It always seems to be a stopping point or a point where everything slows because they got to adjust their budget. At what point does that cease where we don't have to continue to wait for them to adjust their budget, which they should already have
as I mentioned earlier,
mapped out?
In my opinion, it's good news that they postponed the budget till February because that's precisely what they're trying to avoid, these issues. So it's like, okay, we'll postpone. That means we can negotiate with the IMF for the reinstituted rate. It means we can watch the price of oil slowly rise so that when we do complete the budget, we'll have a reinstituted currency and the price of oil will be slightly higher, all of which works in their favor.
Yeah, well, I think they've had enough days to get all of this stuff together. So if I know here in this country we have programs that doesn't take as long to give a budget once you enter the information that's needed. For example, you got $45 a barrel, $48 a barrel, $53 a barrel. What would our budget be? So it wouldn't be something that would take a long time to do or process to get a budget. And
well, let me tell you something.
I know last week.
The United States is the worst example you could probably give. We're $20 trillion in debt, and we don't even pass a legit budget. We continue to do a series of continuing resolutions. So, and we've been around for 240 years, and we still haven't got it right. And that doesn't layer on top of that all of this election hysteria. So I think Iraq's doing a hell of a job under the circumstances. They've just been through basically a quasi-civil war prior to the removal of Saddam Hussein.
Well, I was speaking of the apps and the programs that you can purchase for budgeting and getting your roundabout figures for what you want to set your budget at. I don't know what the U.S. is using.
Here's the other problem. They're a parliamentary system, okay? So they have to create these coalition governments to get anything done. They have something ridiculous like 60 parties, all right? And they got to get 35 of them or whatever the number is to agree to something. So it's just a little more complicated there. It's a perfect storm. They still got issues with Iran. They've got to reinstitute their currency. They have basically a provisional government in place. They're going to have elections later in this year. They've got the United States presidential election, which they've got to believe is going to have some effect on. There's a lot going on. But given all of that, I still think we're on a glide path for a reinstitution in January. Now, could things change? Sure. And if they do, my next call, I'll explain why. But as we speak today, I'm feeling pretty good.
All right. So last week you had the IMF call.
Yeah.
Last week was the IMF call, and 2 weeks before that, you had the other call. So was there progress between the 2 weeks prior to last week's call, which was 3 weeks ago?
Yeah. Well, that was incorporated in everything I said at the beginning of the call.
I heard it.
Everything, everything in there was bits and pieces I got from a lot of different sources, inclusive of the calls.
All righty.
How about this, Les? I'll buy all of your dinar today for 50 cents on the dollar. Whatever you got, I'll buy it right now for 50 cents on the dollar. You selling?
I'll sell it. Yeah, I'll sell it to you. I will.
50 cents on the dollar?
Right now. Yeah.
Okay, then you and I'll call you after this call.
Call me right after the call.
I will do that, my friend. All right?
I'm waiting. All righty.
Okay. You take
Talk
care.
to you later. Thanks, Jim. Say hi to the professor.
Will do. Okay, Les was our last call for the afternoon. That was a rather interesting conversation. I'm going to talk to him in a little while. Again, I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to this call. For those of you calling in for the first time, if the things we've discussed are of interest, I sincerely hope you will contact us to get our initial no-obligation package. Again, the package does include everything you need should you decide to proceed with the establishment of a pre-RV package of asset protection trust. But again, that's entirely your decision. The package has a lot of information about us, about trusts, about the evaluation. Again, you can contact us if you have any questions. We'll be happy to assist you, and there will be no consultation fee. Our next call is scheduled, of course, for next Wednesday. Certainly, if something of a dramatic nature were to happen between now and then, we'll try to get out an emergency email and schedule an emergency conference call. But failing that, we will be back next Wednesday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Thanks for listening, and have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.